This series of videos will cover the lectures for the chapter Transforming the Economy. We will begin with the first section, the American Industrial Revolution. To begin, let's talk about the effects of this first industrial revolution and how industrialization really changed the lives of Americans. So the mass production of goods is really going to uh, allow different consumers to have luxury items that at one point were out of their reach. But now, with the mass production, you're going to see that these individuals will now have access to the item, to the product, because of the low cost. One of the key topics of this section is the outwork system. And so mainly it is the division of labor. It's separating or breaking up the task of making a product into different areas. As you read in chapter 9, section 1, you saw that merchants in Lynn, Massachusetts became the shoe bosses, mainly because they set up a system of dividing the labor into different components. There was different people completing a part of the product. So something to think about. Think about cleaning a house, right? If you're given the task all by yourself, you have to clean the house. It's gonna take you longer. It's gonna make you more tired. But if let's say you had help and you had people that could help you clean the house and you divided the labor. Somebody cleans the kitchen, somebody cleans the restrooms, somebody sweeps, somebody mops. You can see that you will finish faster and you will be done. You won't be as tired. So that's something that happens with the division of labor or outwork system. People can focus on a specific task from the development of the product. In this case, shoes. Some people eventually are just cutting the leather. Some people are sewing cloth inside the leather. Another person is eventually attaching the full shoe into the sole and then sent back to the factory where it's packaged, it's inspected and packaged and then sent out. So that's going to create opportunities for consumers to now have to be able to buy cheaper shoes. So at one point when these artisans were the only ones that made shoes, they had leverage. They could ask for whatever salary they wanted because they were the only ones making it. But now that machines are making these goods, employees are no longer having leverage. They can't ask for whatever price. They have to eventually be content with whatever the company, whatever the factory gives them. And a lot of these artisans were forced to give up their task, their craft, and become wage workers because the machines had totally taken over their industry. And now, if they want to survive, they had to take a job. So by having increased production, you're going to see that the cost of goods will lower. So let's look at this diagram of supply and demand. So supply and demand is basically a law of economics where when there's a rise in supplies, right? There's a lot of, let's say, shoes, and there's a low demand of shoes, then the prices of the good will eventually fall. But let's say when there's not a lot of supply, but there's a lot of demand, then the prices will go up. An example that I can use is I remember when I first bought my first flash drive. Flash drive with 54 megabytes, and it cost me about $70. There was not a lot of flash drives in the market, so it was a new market, so there was not a lot of them. So there was a lot of people wanting them, and so the price went up. And now, if I go buy a flash drive, I just bought one a few months ago. I bought a 10 gigabyte about $10, right? Because there's so many flash drives in the market that there's not a lot of demand, so the prices will eventually have gone down. So as mentioned in the notes, the outwork system had people working from their own homes. These merchants divided the work. Portion of the product was made in some homes, and some of it in other parts of the town. And eventually, once they were finalized, they were sent back to the actual factories, to actual company for inspection, and then to eventually package, and then to be delivered. So this is an important chart, gives you a little bit of perspective. So when you look at what were the top producers, right? Who hired the most workers? So textiles, you can see textiles is the producer. Uh, Boots and shoes is also the big hire of workers. And then the last group is men's clothing, right? But if you look at who made the most value, who had the biggest profit, it's going to be flour and meal. Then here at the bottom, you have leather and liquors. So those produce more money, more profit. So you may ask, well, why is this the case? So if you look at boots, cotton textiles, and men's clothing, they need more workers because it's more of a process to make that good. But if you look at the flour and meal, leather and liquors, it's less. You need less workers, so you pay less workers, so there's more of a profit that is made by these workers. Another system change that took place, aside from the outwork system, is the factory system. So the factory is born at this time, and it's really introduced to produce products that are not suitable for the outwork system. So one of those products is the slaughtering of animals, in this case pigs. So they concentrated on one building. So in one building, the entire task are done. While the artwork system, there's many buildings where things happen, where things are worked on, while the factory is just one location. So the idea is that each individual is specializing in a specific task. So if you look at it, it's kind of similar to the outwork system. The difference is that in the factory, it's just under one roof, but uh, it's still broken down. It's still divided. The labor is still divided among the different workers. So one of the things that happens in the slaughterhouse, right? So is basically it's like a disassembly line for the slaughtering of pigs. So one opens up the pig, another one takes out the insides, another one starts to chop them up, and so on and so on, where the breakdown of the pig eventually takes place during this time. So this is going to speed up production. The more goods you have, the lower the demand is, the lower the prices, and so that both of them are both system, factory system and artwork system, impact the flow of products. So a lot of these factories are going to be typically uh, run on water power. And the water power is basically these factories are usually next to rivers. That's why a lot of cities are next to rivers. The water power was basically to spinning gears inside a building, and I'll show you a diagram in a few minutes. So when talking about the factory, right? Typically not very healthy, not good for the environment, especially in the early years when people didn't know the effects of it. So it is going to have this negative effect on our environment. So when talking about the water power factories, you can see here this wheel is being turned by water. and that's why the early factories were next to rivers or bodies of water that had running streams. So one of the things that you see here in this diagram, right, is that you have the um, the wheel here, and it's eventually turning gears inside the factory where it's eventually making machines run. And so that is the water power that existed for the factories in the late 1800s, then late 1700s, and then by the early 1800s you're going to see that a lot of these factories are going to move to the use of minerals as their as their form of